If you're chasing respect, you're already losing it. Because the moment you need approval, you hand away your power. Stop trying to be chosen. Stay consistent, stay calm, and watch how respect starts chasing you instead. Most people believe respect comes from being understood, so they explain themselves again and again, hoping clarity will finally change how they are treated. But explanation is often mistaken for strength when, in reality, repeated explanation is a signal of uncertainty. When you keep explaining your boundaries, your values, or your feelings to someone who has already shown you they don't honor them, you are not communicating anymore. You are negotiating your worth. Respect erodes not because you lacked the right words, but because your words were not followed by action. Quiet boundaries work differently. They do not rely on emotional speeches or repeated reminders. They are enforced through behavior. A quiet boundary is when you decide internally what you will tolerate and then calmly adjust your presence when that line is crossed. No announcement, no warning speech, no emotional reaction, just a change. People feel that change immediately because it removes access, attention, or energy they were previously receiving for free. Explaining feels productive because it gives the illusion of control. You feel like if you can just make them understand, things will improve. But understanding has never been the problem. Most people already understand how they are treating you. What they are testing is whether there will be consequences. When there are none, explanation becomes permission. Each time you explain without enforcing, you teach others that your boundaries are flexible, emotional, and negotiable. Quiet boundaries require emotional discipline. They ask you to sit with the discomfort of not being understood, not being validated, and not being chased. This is where most people fail. They confuse calm enforcement with coldness or fear they will be seen as difficult, distant, or unkind. But respect has never been built on likability. It is built on predictability and self-trust. When your actions consistently align with your standards, people learn how to treat you without you having to say much. Silence is often the strongest boundary because it removes the emotional reward. When someone disrespects you and you immediately respond with explanations, reactions, or long messages, you are still engaging. You are still feeding the dynamic. Quiet boundaries starve disrespect of attention. They shift the power dynamic because the other person is no longer controlling your emotional output. Enforcing a quiet boundary does not mean disappearing dramatically or cutting people off impulsively. It means reducing access in proportion to the behavior. It means shorter responses instead of long ones. It means less availability instead of constant accommodation. It means choosing not to argue with someone who has already decided not to listen. These small shifts are deeply uncomfortable for people who benefited from your over-explaining because suddenly they are forced to sit with the consequences of their behavior. Many people fear that if they stop explaining, they will be misunderstood. But being misunderstood is often safer than being repeatedly disrespected. Explanation invites debate. Boundaries end it. When you stop defending your decisions, you stop giving others the illusion that they have a vote in them. This is where authority quietly forms, not through dominance, but through self-respect made visible. There is also a difference between communication and justification. Communication is mutual. Justification is one-sided. If you find yourself constantly justifying why you need rest, space, honesty, or consistency, you are already in a dynamic where respect is lacking. Quiet boundaries pull you out of that dynamic without confrontation. They allow your behavior to speak where words have failed. People who respect themselves do not rush to clarify every silence. They understand that not everything requires a response. They let unanswered questions remain unanswered. They let others feel the gap created by changed behavior. That gap is where awareness grows. It is where people either adjust or fall away. Both outcomes are clarity. When you enforce quiet boundaries, you also retrain yourself. You learn to trust your internal signals instead of seeking external confirmation. You stop outsourcing your self-worth to how others react. This internal shift is what others eventually sense. Respect follows not because you demanded it, but because your energy no longer invites disrespect. The most powerful part of quiet boundaries is that they remove emotional chaos. There is no escalation, no argument, no drama, just consistency. Over time, people learn that crossing certain lines results in predictable distance, not emotional explosions. This predictability creates respect even in difficult personalities because they know exactly where you stand. Some people will accuse you of changing when you stop explaining. They will say you are colder, quieter, or different. What they really mean is that you are no longer accessible in the same way. You are no longer available for emotional labor that goes unreciprocated. Quiet boundaries expose who benefited from your lack of them. Respect is not restored in a single moment. It is rebuilt through repetition. Each time you choose action over explanation, you reinforce your standard. Each time you stay calm instead of reactive, you strengthen your position. Each time you walk away instead of convincing, you teach others how to approach you. This approach requires patience because it doesn't deliver immediate validation. It delivers long-term stability. It removes the exhausting cycle of hope and disappointment. It replaces emotional bargaining with grounded presence. Over time, people either rise to meet your standard or remove themselves from your life, and both outcomes protect your peace. When you stop explaining and start enforcing quiet boundaries, you stop chasing respect and start embodying it. Detaching from outcomes begins when you realize how much of your behavior is driven by wanting a specific reaction from others. Approval, reassurance, attention, consistency, affection. When these become the goal, your energy shifts from grounded to needy, even if you never say a word. People sense this immediately. The moment your self-worth depends on how someone responds, respect quietly slips away because power has moved out of your hands. Outcome attachment makes you invest emotionally before trust has been earned. You give more patience than is reasonable, more chances than are deserved, and more access than is healthy, all because you are hoping for a different ending. You stay longer in conversations that drain you. You tolerate mixed signals. You accept inconsistency, not because it feels right, but because you're focused on what could happen instead of what is happening. Detachment is not indifference. It is emotional self-control. It is the ability to show up fully without clinging to a result. When you detach from outcomes, you stop trying to manage how others feel about you. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop adjusting yourself to avoid losing someone. This alone changes how you are perceived because calm presence always commands more respect than emotional urgency. Consistency replaces approval when you decide that your behavior will not change based on how someone treats you in the moment. You are kind without overgiving. You are firm without hostility. You are available without being on call. Consistency builds trust because people know what to expect from you, not because you bend, but because you remain steady. People who chase outcomes often confuse emotional effort with emotional value. They believe that the more they care, the more they will be valued. In reality, value is assigned when your presence feels stable, not when it feels desperate. Detachment removes the pressure from interactions. It signals that you are choosing to be there, not hoping to be chosen. When you are detached from outcomes, you stop trying to speed things up. You allow people to reveal themselves at their own pace. You observe actions instead of interpreting words. You no longer rush to close emotional gaps with explanation, reassurance, or over-availability. This creates space, and space is where respect grows. Consistency also protects you from emotional manipulation. When someone pulls away to provoke a reaction and you remain steady, the dynamic collapses. There is no reward for inconsistency anymore. Your emotional state does not rise and fall with their behavior. This forces clarity. Either they step forward with effort, or the connection naturally weakens. Detachment requires trusting yourself more than the outcome. It means believing that you will be okay regardless of how someone chooses to show up. This belief removes fear from your decisions. You stop negotiating with red flags. You stop explaining why you deserve basic respect. You stop holding on to potential at the expense of reality. Many people fear detachment because they associate it with loss. They think if they stop caring so much, they will lose the connection. But what they often lose instead is anxiety, overthinking, and emotional exhaustion. What remains is clarity. You see who meets you consistently and who only shows up when it benefits them. Consistency does not mean rigidity. It means alignment. Your words match your actions. Your standards match your behavior. You don't say you value peace while tolerating chaos. You don't say you want respect while chasing validation. This internal alignment is felt long before it is noticed consciously. When you detach from outcomes, you stop chasing closure. You don't need the perfect explanation or final conversation to move forward. You accept information through behavior. Silence becomes data. Distance becomes information. You trust what you see instead of what you hope for. People often start treating you differently when you detach, not because you demand it, but because your energy no longer seeks permission. You are no longer trying to be impressive or indispensable. You are simply present. This presence is calm, self-contained, and emotionally regulated, which makes disrespect feel out of place around you. Consistency over time does what emotional intensity never can. It builds credibility. It teaches others that you mean what you say without repeating yourself. It shows that your boundaries are not reactions, but principles. This is where long-term respect is formed quietly and without effort. Detachment also deepens your self-respect. You stop abandoning yourself for outcomes that are out of your control. You stop proving your worth through endurance. You recognize that being chosen by the wrong person is not a win. This internal shift is subtle but powerful. When approval is no longer your currency, you become harder to manipulate and easier to respect. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You don't need immediate reassurance. You don't need promises to feel secure. You trust patterns, not potential. As consistency replaces approval, relationships become simpler. You no longer feel the urge to chase, fix, or convince. You allow people to meet you where you are, and if they don't, you don't collapse or retaliate, you stay steady. Detachment frees your energy. Instead of being consumed by what might happen, you become anchored in how you choose to respond. This is where emotional strength becomes visible, not loud, not forceful, just undeniable. When you stop chasing outcomes and commit to consistency, respect follows naturally because people respect what is stable, grounded, and self-directed.